Let's take a look at color inside of Corel Painter 12. First of all, let's make sure that we're looking at the same thing. In your color palette, go to your submenu, which is at the top right of the palette, and click on it, and make sure that if you have your color displaying as RGB, that you change it to display as HSV. HSV is your hue, your saturation, and your value. You can set these independently to pick any color you want. The hue is expressed on this hue ring here in Corel Painter 12, and it lets you pick any hue you want. And you can see if I move the slider bar, I can really fine-tune this and get any kind of hue that I want. The saturation runs down the center of this triangle horizontally, and the saturation is basically how bright or how dull a color is. And you can see on the slider bar here, it kind of goes back and forth. The value is represented on the left side, the vertical axis of the triangle, and it goes from light to dark. And you can see you can move it on the slider bar here and fine-tune it. So I made a little diagram here, which will kind of help break the hue ring into some different components to make it easier to understand. I have some of the primary colors listed here and where they are. In the spectrum of light, it kind of begins with red here, and then it ends in the ultraviolet area. So you can really get pretty much any color of visible light that you want quite easily. What's interesting to note is that this is also set up how a color wheel would be for artists. So your complementary colors are parallel, or they're across from each other. So the complementary color to yellow is indigo. This blue color here. So these are right across from each other. They're complementary colors. Same thing with magenta here and this aqua color. So any of these colors that are directly across from each other are going to be complementary. And just as well, if you get really into color theory, you'll know that there's also different combinations of colors that you can do. Besides just two, you could do three. So for instance, this magenta and this yellow and this aqua, these are all three complementary, and even this fourth one. Or likewise, you know, you could do these three colors, which are complementary. There's all kinds of different combinations that you can get into. But this just kind of shows you where they are in relation to the hue ring. I consider this to be about the midpoint here of the color. So these aren't really too important right now. It's just kind of a way to give you an idea of where these colors lie on the spectrum of visible light. Next, if we get a little more into it on the color wheel, here's a little more complicated chart. I have these colors broken up into what I feel are some very helpful categories that'll help you decide which colors to pick when you're choosing colors. So first of all, we have this kind of red tinted area and this blue tinted area, and these are our warm and our cool hemispheres. So from this green all the way over to this violet here, these are all fairly warm colors, and if you use these colors, it's going to make things more vibrant and more warm. The opposite of those are the cool colors, primarily cool colors, which are these here. And you can have some warm cool and some cool warm colors. There's combinations of each, but this is just kind of a general collection of colors that are warm and cool. And then we also have, kind of opposite to that, are the light and the dark hemispheres here. So these colors from red to cyan, I see these as being a lot lighter. So if I was going to use highlights, I would probably shift more towards these colors. And if I was going to use shadows, I would more likely use these blues and magentas and violets and things. So you kind of have your areas. It makes it really easy if you know where to hunt for colors. They're a lot easier to pick. Also, you'll note there's some kind of polarities in the color that are opposite to each other. As I mentioned, the yellow and the indigo are complementary to each other, but also you'll note the yellow is a fairly light color, and I have it indicated by this L here, and I feel that the indigo is a dark color, And you'll notice that in most cases, the light is opposite to the dark. So yellow's lighter, indigo's darker. Same thing over here. This cyan is lighter, and this red is darker compared to each other. It also alternates. It goes light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So it's kind of some swapping around of light and dark colors. It's interesting to make note of that. When I'm choosing colors and doing shading, the reason why this is important is because if I make a new layer here, I'll just make something. Let's say my object's going to be this orange color here. Maybe it's an orange even. So when I go to shade it, if I don't shift my hue at all and I just make my color darker, which I'm going to do here, for example, what'll happen is as I start to shade, everything will just kind of come out looking kind of monochromatic. It won't really have a whole lot of life, and it'll be kind of dull. Versus if I do another example here and I shade it differently and shade it by changing the hue a little bit, it's just going to give it more life. So I have my original orange color here, and then on the chart you'll see that I have this dark and light. So if I'm at this midpoint here and I want to darken my color, if I want to darken it besides just changing the value and the saturation, I can also change the hue to make it appear darker. So without adding any value, any darkness value, I'm going to shade this next example here. So let's sample this orange color. We're just shifting the hue to the left a little bit. And that's our shadow, and we'll shift it a little more towards red. Add some shading. Now let's add a highlight. So we'll take this yellow here, which is going the opposite direction from our original orange color to the right, and we'll add a highlight. So I haven't used any value at all to make this shading here. I've only used hue, so you can see that there really is some lightness and darkness difference just between the hue regions here. And if you know where they are, it makes it really easy to give more life to your shading. I'm not recommending that you only use hue to shade with. I'm just saying if you add that into your workflow, it's going to give your shading more depth and more character. So for example, if I was going to shade this how I would normally shade it, I'd shift the hue a little bit first, and then of course add some value to it. Shift it a little more, add more value, and then same thing with the highlight. Put it over towards yellow, add a nice bright highlight, then shift it a little more and add some lighter value. You can see compared to these two, this is top examples definitely shaded. You know, it doesn't look bad, and if you want your artwork to have a kind of more flat, dull appearance, that's fine. But if you want something to kind of sparkle and pop more, you're going to want to do these hue shifts. So hopefully that's pretty clear here in these examples where I have some little swatches here. So if this is your base color, going towards a darker color is going to darken your hue, and going towards the lighter color is going to lighten your hue, and thusly lighten your shading. Now I have these neutral cool and neutral warm areas because magenta compared to aqua I don't really feel is really lighter or darker, and you also kind of get to this halfway point that divides these light dark alternations. So I feel like these are kind of neutral polarity areas. They're definitely, one is definitely warmer than the other and one is definitely cooler. So I feel like they also kind of influence the bearing of all these colors. So the magenta's in the warm hemisphere here, and the aqua's in the cool hemisphere. So I wouldn't say that, you know, one is necessarily dark and one is necessarily light. But in relation to other colors, if you were starting from, you know, somewhere over here as your sample color, going to the right or to the left, I would feel like this magenta could either be darker or lighter. It's kind of, you know, relative to how you use it. So that's the hue ring. Let's get into the other component, which is this triangle here.